Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello and welcome to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions in life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host Aditi. Let's get on with the show. Allison, welcome to the show. It's really exciting to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You're a licensed mental health counselor, certified PACT therapist based in New York. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Absolutely. I've been a therapist for a long time, but about 12 years ago, I was introduced to my mentor, Dr. Tatkin, who had a certain approach, the psychobiological approach to counseling, couple therapy, I should say. And I began to specialize in couples soon after that. So for the last 13 years, I work with couples every day, and it's become, quite a passion of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you worked with couples a lot, so you're definitely quite an expert in the area for sure. We are going to be talking about relationship readiness today. But before we talk about any of our topic, we have a segment called Have You Met Allison Howe? In which I ask you a couple of really quick questions, and all you have to do is give us the first answer that comes to your head. Are you ready to go?
I am.
Fantastic. What is your favorite book?
So my favorite book is the one that I find myself recommending to so many people in my practice, and it's called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. And it's about learning about trusting your personal instincts.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like not enough people do that anymore. There's a lot of overthinking going on. I'm guilty
Agree.
of it myself. So,
Me
yeah,
too.
for sure. For sure. What about a favorite movie or the movie you last watched if you don't have a favorite?
Well, I thought about this, and my favorite movie is a bit dated, but it was from the early 1980s, and it's called Kramer versus Kramer. And it's now that I think about it, it really was showing my interest in working with couples because it's a beautiful story with Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep as the leading actor and actress, portraying a couple going through a very difficult divorce. So it's a wonderful movie. It's my favorite.
Yeah, Kramer versus Kramer is a classic. I feel like the 80s isn't too old. I feel like,
There you go.
it's you can still watch them
It's still
and have a good
relevant.
time. For sure, for sure. Movies are forever. What about a podcast that you're currently listening to?
I am obsessed with The Lazy Genius, which is Kendra Adachi. She wrote the book, The Lazy Genius, and she has 13 principles for leading your life. And she's full of energy. She's kind of like everyone's big sister. And I don't miss an episode. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I might have to check that one out myself. What about a role model, a famous role model that you've looked up to?
So many, but the one that came to mind was Jane Goodall, the English primatologist. She just to me represents a woman who has lived her values, over her lifetime. And her work is just amazing, and she's someone I admire.
Jane Goodall is a really, really good one. I feel like I haven't heard her name in a while, but she's changed. I mean, she's changed the field so much. We know, as someone who loves animal facts, yeah, a bit geeking out over her. What about the last course that you completed?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's relevant because I just completed my certification course at the PACT Institute. So this was a year-long journey where I am one of the inaugural clinicians, their first inaugural class of certified PACT therapists. So that just ended December 31st.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to be hearing a lot about that approach, I'm assuming, in our episode today, which brings me to our interview. We've gotten to know you, and now let's talk about our topic for today, relationship readiness.
Yeah.
Starting at the very top, what is a relationship to you? How would you describe a relationship?
When I think about a relationship, I think about a secure functioning relationship, which is a relationship between two people who enter it willingly, and it's based on mutuality, fairness and sensitivity for both partners, high level of collaboration and cooperation, and really a willingness to accept each other as you are, not an enhanced version of who you're going to be, but a real a real desire to grow up together. So that's, and the last thing I would say would be it's truly being on a team. Relationships are a team sport.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it, especially when you talked about like an enhanced version of who you are. I think too often we view relationships as like being half of one complete person when that's not really the case, I don't feel.
Mm. I don't agree. I agree with you that it's not the case. I see that
Yeah.
so often in my practice where people will come into couple therapy with, it may not be an idea they have, it's in their conscious awareness, but they really hope that they can have these enhancements in their partner, that their partner will be different, perhaps better. And that usually doesn't go well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like you working as a team, but you're kind of two individuals who are working together as a team. Like you said, a team sport. You're not exactly one unit. You really have to work hard to make sure that you're on the same page.
It really is hard work, but it can pay off in great ways.
Yeah, absolutely. In your opinion, do relationships still hold the same kind of meaning and structure as they did decades ago? And are they as important?
It's such a great question. I think it truly depends on the culture and society in question. So when I think about um, primarily heterosexual couples in the United States, where I'm from, marriage has changed dramatically over the past century. We think about women entering the workforce after World War II, becoming more educated, and then the advent of oral contraception. All of these things really changed the structure of and the meaning, the importance, I believe, of marriage. Where now with Gen Z, it's lots of the young people that I speak to say they don't really know if they would consider marriage. I will say that for my LGBT couples, relationships hold a different meaning, structure, and importance today because they really were not acknowledged previously. So they have such an important meaning. And I just wanted to really make that differentiation.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to note that legal status makes a world of difference for queer couples in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Relationship readiness. How do you define it? What is it?
So it's so funny. I had to take a moment and look it up. What is readiness? Readiness is defined as the state of being fully prepared for something, or also your willingness. But it's really both. So then, when I put it in the context of relationship readiness, it's the idea of being both willing and fully prepared for a relationship. So that's the definition of it. However, I must add, I don't believe we can ever fully be prepared for a relationship. And I don't think that has to be a problem. I do believe that our willingness to be open to relationship is very important to consider if you are considering being in a relationship. And I would like to just speak about a misunderstanding that I believe our culture tends to hold, which is that you cannot love another person or you can't be in a relationship until you really know yourself. this is a very common theme that I will hear. The idea that I have to really know myself very well. And while in theory that sounds good, it goes against everything we know about infant development and the whole developmental trajectory in life, because we come into the world as newborns in the eyes of our earliest caregiver. So all of our development is with another person. So I believe that we get ready for relationship by talking about who we are. That's great. Gaining self knowledge, but just do it with another person, an individual therapist, a trusted friend, a clergy person. But it must be done in relationship itself. It can't be done alone or off in a cave or in your room. Those things just won't really give you the full picture.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you expanded that to not just include a romantic partner, but also people like therapists and friends as well. Because I think sometimes we think of getting to know ourselves as something we have to do on our own, but I don't think anyone
Mhm.
actually does that. I think everyone has help in some way.
Yeah, we're wired to be in interaction with other people. That is, I learn who I am by having a conversation with you. And if we talk about different things, the back and forth between the two of us is going to help both of us clarify our thinking. So it's such a
Yeah.
key thing to be doing it with another person.
Yeah, that's such a great way of looking at it. I've never actually thought about it that way, but that does make a lot of sense when you put it that way.
That's great.
How does kind of relationship readiness, as you define it, how does it affect relationships? What does it
Yeah.
end up looking like?
So I believe if you're both unprepared for this journey and unwilling, that is going to definitely affect the relationship because it's just not going to launch, right? But being unprepared in and of itself does not have to be a problem. If you do have another partner who, by the way, they're also not going to be fully prepared, but if they have a willingness, you're going to go through the journey together, and there's a tremendous amount of trial and error. So, I really believe that all the preparation in the world will not prepare us for what happens when our nervous systems come in contact with the nervous system of the other person we're in relationship with, because that happens in real time and that's impacted by so many things, including memory, including previous experiences with other people in our life, including how we feel in the moment, whether we're tired, whether we're a bit depressed, or whether we're excited. I mean, there's so many components, and we cannot take into account all of those things. They can surprise us. So ultimately, every partnership, when two people are in a relationship, you're working on the moment to moment interaction where there are both high levels of connection, but actually misattunements and errors that are happening throughout. Many of the errors and misattunements we don't even notice because we're kind of just in a flow together. And if we're relaxed and it's going well, we don't even pick up on them. But when there are misattunements or errors that don't get corrected in enough time where people can get back to the conversation and feel relaxed, we get into problems. And it's when couples create these experiences of sustained misattunement that isn't getting repaired, that isn't getting corrected, and partners aren't getting relieved, then couples find themselves in very difficult patterns that causes a lot of harm.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a couple of questions that came up while with that answer there for me. One of them was, you talk about, I guess, a lack of preparedness and how it's almost not possible to be fully prepared. When when are we too unprepared? I'm thinking off the top of my head, mental health issues that you might want to tackle first before you dump them on someone else.
Yeah, I mean it's really a good point because if you are going through a significant mental health issue And that may not be the most ideal time to be entering a relationship because you may not be feeling fully yourself. However, I certainly hope you're in relationship and getting support with lots of other people at that time. The thing is, however, that there is no right time. You know, even someone who's struggling with a mental health issue, if they are at least being able to move forward a bit in their life, I would be encouraging them to be open to being in a relationship if they wanted that. Because if you're forming a secure relationship, whether you have a mental health history or whether you have any other kind of challenge, it doesn't mean that you still can't work something out with another person where you can enjoy life. You still have to follow the rules of fairness and sensitivity, whether you struggle with a chronic illness or a mental health issue. But your point is well taken. I do think there are absolutely some times when you want to be very, very careful. I think if you're coming right out of a relationship, you know, we've heard of a rebound relationship. Uh, just be aware that you may really be working on so much memory and experience with the other person that could be getting confusing for you with a new relationship. So that I think you have to just really be aware of what could happen there. And I think if you are truly struggling with your own self regulation. Now, that meaning that you cannot really manage you're struggling with your own nervous system in terms of being able to put the brakes on when you need to, your own ability to take a pause when something is happening that is really stimulating for you, your own ability to not overreact in the moment. Everyone has challenges with self-regulation, and there are some people who are extremely challenged. I would say for those individuals, maybe working on their own self-regulation capacity would help them in a relationship. But I want to be very careful with saying that people should, this particular question, I just want to make sure I'm clear that there aren't too many categories where I think people shouldn't be willing to get in there and try it.
Yeah, don't hold yourself back. I guess if that's
Yeah.
something that you're looking for,
Yeah.
to summarize. I, I guess another question that came up is, when you mentioned, if people are both unwilling and unprepared, they can probably come across problems. Why
Yeah.
do people enter relationships when they're unwilling? Why does that happen, and how does it happen? Is it like a lack of awareness? Is that something you've
You know,
come across?
it's well, certainly I have come across in couple therapy where one partner will really be unwilling to be in couple therapy, unwilling to be in the relationship. And that may be why the other partner is bringing them into couple therapy with a hope that the therapy will change that. What the work there to be done is to really find out if that unwillingness is a real thing, because that is a major structural problem. If one person doesn't want to do this, you can't do it. You need two people with willingness. So your question is, why might someone be unwilling? I think that's what I heard. There
Yeah.
can be so many reasons. They maybe didn't have, they may have memories of being with parents who didn't really do very well together in a relationship. So maybe that's out of their conscious awareness. Maybe they have issues around confidence of how they're going to be in a relationship. Maybe they're a bit afraid. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure attachment styles would probably tie into that, I'm assuming. Like if they just didn't grow up seeing healthy relationships.
Well, attachment styles do come into play, and attachment styles can absolutely insecure attachment can take place when partners have been in families where they did not have that secure model. Absolutely. But you can meet with people with all different sorts of their different attachment styles, and it still doesn't mean that they're unwilling. It can just mean that there's going to be more to pay attention to, that they're going to have to consider in learning how to get along well.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, is that there's just so much diversity in how people approach these things. For
So
sure,
much.
for sure.
Yeah.
Where does relationship readiness begin?
Where
how
does
how does one become ready? How does one do that? Is that even possible?
yeah, I think it begins with birth. I think our very first experiences as newborns, our experience with both when we're growing up, what we experience is loving and unloving behaviors that we're having. Their first, how our mother or our father, our caregiver, what we learned from them, how we experience them. I think that's where it starts. That becomes the template that gets hardwired into us. And another way of thinking about it is when we're young, when we're pre-verbal, we signal. When a baby will cry, that's a signaling action or behavior. And from those earliest signals, how that primary caregiver responds to the signal begins to already lay the groundwork for our relationship readiness, in a sense, because it's starting there. We learn that if we signal and our primary caregiver gives us a pretty satisfactory response, that gives the message to the child that when I signal, I get responded to. And that's a good thing. I'm going to signal and I'm going to get my needs met. However, if the signal is not met with a response that is attuned, or it takes too long for the caregiver to respond, the child begins to get the message that signaling is kind of complicated. And they may even ultimately create some ways inside of them as they grow up where they start to take care of some of these things themselves. In some families, children learn that signaling, when they signal, that there can even be a consequence from the primary caregiver. Something like, you're such a burden, you're such a pain. Why did you signal? So all of these experiences can impact how a person is, how a partner will show up in a relationship. And I think that's where it begins.
Mhm, mhm. That's very, very early on and difficult to control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, I want to have a hopeful point here. Even if you did not receive, if you grew up in an environment where it was complicated and the signal response consequence sequence that I just spoke about wasn't really fair and sensitive and attuned to you, the child, you still can form a relationship in life that is secure. You
Right.
can learn how to have healthy responses. You can learn how to signal in a way that is heard, and so you'll be seen. So it's really, there's always hope here.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, and definitely something that we're going to talk about in a bit as well. Um, one question, another question I have is, how do we know if we are ready for a relationship? Are there like quizzes available? Is there a test? Like, how do we go about figuring that out?
It's really funny. I love the question. So I went online, and there are quizzes. There's lots of quizzes. There's all kinds of tests. And the questions are actually pretty cool. Here's one. Can you take care of yourself? Are you upfront with your own feelings? How do you handle confrontations? I thought they were wonderful. Uh, what I really think, though, is, and you may not be surprised by this answer, is you actually will know if you're ready by getting in there and experiencing it yourself. Take the leap of faith and try it. You're going to get some information early on about yourself and the person that you're engaging with. And you're either going to want to move forward or not, but you will learn something.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the quizzes are great.
I love that, but there's no teacher. There's no teacher like experience, I suppose.
There's no teacher like experience. There's another idea I did have with regard to this question is, um, think about people in your life in relationships where you admire how the couple does it, that you like to be around them, and kind of paying attention to what you see. It can really help inform you as to what you might like as well. So if you're
Mm.
finding that you have couples in your life and you really like what you see, um, consider that it's time for you to go and create something all your own that has some of those components in it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one that I haven't heard before. Is it safe to say that you should be looking at real life couples and not the stuff you see in movies or read about in books?
Yes, I mean, I'm like everybody else. I love to see the couples in movies, and it's so seductive and it's wonderful. But yes, the real life mentor couples that they've been referred to, a couple where you really can see that this couple has created something that is they're a substantial couple. They make each other better. They're growing up together. They're a bright light in the world. We're attracted to couples like that. We're drawn to them. And if you have the ability and to spend time with couples like that, do it. Um, on the flip side, we all know about the couples where when we're with them, you don't get that feeling. You may get that little feeling in your stomach like, ooh, that didn't seem to go so well, and pay attention to that as well, because that is a sign of a relationship that isn't secure, and everyone around a couple like that will have an awareness of that.
Hmm. And I feel like noticing those things kind of in part contributes to that preparedness that kind of ties into being ready as well. Just knowing what you do like and what you don't like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. How can we tell if a potential partner or even a current partner is ready for a relationship? Is there a way
So
to tell?
I think there are ways to consider. How when the relationship is just kind of starting, um, I'd be paying attention to, back to that word, willingness. How willing are they to create time and energy to plan get-togethers, or how available are they? How willing are they to share conversations that seem to be fair, that consider the two of you, not just one of you? And how well do they do with, once things are getting started, how is contact maintained? How does that process go? That's a true signal and response between two people when they're first getting to know one another. And in my experience, couples who don't do very well together, once they're coming into couple therapy, they're struggling. Many times I will find out that the very beginning sequence of how things went when they first were getting started was also, there were also problems there. There wasn't a fair signal response. The contact wasn't being maintained in a way that worked for at least one of the partners. So it's interesting to think of it that way. I would like to say that I encourage people to pay attention to how a potential partner manages being under pressure. What do you notice? How does this person handle a very stressful moment? Because that can tell a lot. And how are you in the presence of your partner in a moment like that? And I think something that doesn't get discussed enough is, it's rather old fashioned, I think, that in the thinking, but do not be hesitant to introduce new partners to trusted friends and even family. Sometimes people wait too long to bring a new partner into their inner circle, when in reality, your inner circle, they know you, they love you, and they have the ability to see some things that perhaps you may not be able to see. So I think it's really important to vet potential partners, and you'll be able to hear from your inner circle what they think in terms of your partner's readiness, what they
Yeah,
see.
for sure. For sure. I think, like, especially in, I guess, that honeymoon phase of the relationship, we tend to look at our partner with like rose tinted lenses, and you need that outside perspective to kind of get you back in reality for a little bit.
That is so true, because that really does happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I guess that partially answers my next question, which is how do we deal with the relationship if either ourselves or our partner, that either ourselves or our partner are not actually ready to be in?
So if either you or your partner are not really ready to be in this relationship, this is not going to move forward. It's going to come out pretty clearly, because in a situation like that, the way you just described it, there may be one person who wants to be in the relationship and is looking for a future here, and just getting some kind of regular sign from the other partner that they're not all in.
Mhm.
There's nothing here to build on. This truly is what's called a structural problem, because you cannot build a foundation where one person is 2 feet in and one person only has 1 foot in. There's nothing to build on. So, you know, personally, I think it's better when this gets resolved sooner rather than later. Sometimes couples go on too long, I believe, in a situation where one is in and one is out, and they lose precious time, because and no one has ever been successful, at least not in my experience, anecdotally, to have an unwilling partner and then get them to totally turn it around, and that they suddenly were. You cannot kind of pull someone into a relationship. At least that's not been my
Mhm.
experience. If someone really is just not wanting to do it,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, for
doesn't
sure.
work.
What about if you yourself, like maybe you want the relationship, but you don't feel like perhaps, that self-regulation, for example, might be in place, or you're not sure that the self-regulation is in place, or maybe
Yeah.
you've just got other kind of things that might be holding you back from a relationship that you do want and a person that you do want to be with. Is there a way to work on that?
Well, all of those concerns that you raise, they're legitimate. And people,
Hmm.
those are real things that people worry about. My sense is that you have to, once again, be in the relationship. I think you need to then be working with your partner on all of those things, and talking and figuring it out and understanding what you're really doing together. What are you calling this thing? What are you both envisioning, and how is it meeting the needs of both partners? If you have other interests, or you don't have the time or the availability, I think that has to be made explicit. Too often people don't do that, and it goes on and becomes a bigger issue. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, yeah, I do like that. I like both those bits of advice. I think, like, one, giving yourself the chance, but also on the other instant, if your partner is ready, maybe just break up with them. That might be a good idea.
Sometimes it will be. And
Yeah.
go find someone who really wants to do this, because it's complicated enough. Once you have two willing partners, you have enough challenges to figure each other out and to set up a life together that works for both of you. It can be great, but there's also work involved. You do need that willingness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Um, do you have any practices in mind that you would recommend for people to kind of help improve their relationship readiness and pursue a relationship?
Something I've been thinking about, Aditi, was there's some things I'm going to talk about now, that when I'm working with couples early on in a relationship, some have already married in some cases, it will become clear to me that they had not considered some of these things. So I'd like to share those with you, if I may, and see what you think of my list here. Really, if you have a fundamental difference in lifestyle choice, the way you want to live your life compared with the way your partner does, it's kind of a big deal. So if you're thinking about wanting to work on yourself a bit before you engage in a relationship, that's something to consider. Imagine the lifestyle that you want to lead. Have you given significant thought to whether you want to have children? It ends up being a rather big ticket item in a relationship, where if partners have not done their own self appraisal or self inquiry process and arrive in a relationship and get quite serious, and one doesn't want children and one does, that can be quite a heartbreak. So consider where you are to the best of your ability on whether you want to have children. Are you interested in monogamy or not? This is something else to really be considering. And once again, talk to a lot of people, spend time with all sorts of couples to see what you really like or believe you would like. Consider what kind of a social life you envision having. Are you someone who really is social, and therefore the partner you're with will likely have to also be pretty social if that's the life you see yourself having, right? So picking someone who doesn't like to be around other people too often, that may be very hard. So consider this. Where does your career fit into your life? What about substance use? You know, is it something you do? Do you not want to have a partner who engages in that? Where are you on the topic of religion? Have you considered where you want to live? Are you open to leaving the country? Do you want to move to another part of the world? Do you want to live next to your mother? All of these things matter, and they can cause issues in a relationship if they haven't been considered. And couple more to talk about whether you actually do want to marry. That's a big one. Some people want to, some people don't. And how much affection do you want to have? Do you think that having physical touch is important? If you meet someone who really that's a struggle, well, that's going to be something you're going to have to really work on for your whole marriage. So this is just a list that I came up with of some things to consider before you jump in. I would never say that you have to, do a deep inquiry process into all of these things before being ready for a relationship, but I don't think you would be wasting your time to be considering some of these things.
Mm, mm. I think that's really, I mean, a lot of those questions on the list are kind of a no-brainer. Like, religion and comfort with that. Do you want marriage? Do you want kids? I feel like a lot of people ask that naturally, especially when they're looking for long-term relationships. But the physical affection one, I never really considered that as something to like think about consciously before you enter a relationship. But it makes so much sense to
Yeah,
actually ask that, because people have very different levels of comfort around that.
they really do.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess knowing it yourself, even if you're not, as you said, interrogating your partner about it or having a deep inquiry process, at least knowing what you want for yourself will help you communicate
Yes,
when the need
absolutely.
arises. Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. Now, I will move on to our practice/habit experiment debrief, where we talk a little bit about trying to put everything we've learned into practice. So, aside from the questions that you just listed, do you have a practice that you do perhaps in your personal life or that you've recommended to clients to help
Yeah.
improve your relationship readiness?
Yes. So I'm a big fan of journaling. This is a form of journaling, and this is a Nikon journaling exercise, which Nikon is Japanese for introspection. So it's really a structured method of self-reflection that you can just do with your open up your journal, and there's 3 questions that you consider on a daily basis. What did I receive from others today? What did I give to others? And what difficulties did I cause others? And when I first was introduced to this method, the first thing I thought about was, where's number 4? What difficulties did others cause me? Because that's natural tendency to think that, but that has been omitted, deliberately. And I think that's a very important part of this exercise, because it really does put the focus on um, how challenging we ourselves can be in a relationship and our own ownership of that and the difficulties we can cause our partner. To start to have that mindset along with um, all that we do receive every day in our interactions in our relationships, to be deliberate and intentional in considering all that we get, along with what we're giving. This is a certain way of creating emphasis, putting attention on things that ultimately become very important in a relationship. So I think this exercise is good for someone who's thinking about getting into a relationship, and it's wonderful for couples.
Okay. Okay. When you're kind of in a relationship, how do you go about doing this exercise? Do you do it with your partner? Do you sit down and talk about it together? Or do you do it individually?
It's done individually, although I have worked with couples who really come to like the practice and then like to set some time together to share what they came up with. So I really like to support the couple to determine, um, how it's going to work for them. But I do believe the initial it is a self-reflection, so some part of it has to be done on your own, but the sharing of it I think is actually excellent, and I've seen couples do really well with the sharing.
For sure. I do like that you're kind of letting the couple guide it based on
Yeah.
what's comfortable for them, because sometimes pushing a couple out of their comfort zone can definitely help in some situations, but not always, especially when you kind of just
No,
want them to, yeah, and introspect.
that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. What are three good things about this practice?
Three good things about this practice is it cultivates a um, so here's what I'm going to go back one step. Our brain is quite negativistic. So as a result, it's very helpful for us to have practices and things that we engage in daily that allow us to move into more of a positive mindset, and a gratitude, some type of a gratitude practice, like thinking about what did I receive, really helps balance out the brain's natural negativity bias. So I think that's one really good thing about it. The part about how I cause difficulty for others. This is also, I believe, a very important um, relationship trait, a strength, attribute, in that if you're going to be successful in a relationship, you have to have a willingness to have a thorough self-appraisal process. Some people call it a self-confrontation process. I kind of like self-appraisal, to really consider your role in whatever goes wrong. Also your role in what goes right, but your role in when things are difficult for your partner. That there's a real maturity in that, and I believe we develop and become better people when we can engage in a practice. It can be a compassionate practice. It's not about being harsh with yourself. It's being open and being in reality. So that, and then lastly, um, I believe that giving to others is, if you don't have that in you, and some people don't have it fully developed in them, it's a challenge to be in a relationship if you cannot develop that more. So being in a practice like this gives you an opportunity to maybe grow this part of yourself, because you will need it in a long-term relationship. You're going to be
Mm,
giving, yeah,
mhm.
if you want to do it
Yeah.
well.
All, I guess, really important questions to help facilitate uh, your relationship with another person. And again, that teamwork aspect that
Oh,
we were talking about at the start.
yeah.
What are the challenges when you do this practice? Because off the top of my head, I just when you were mentioning, the maturity and self-appraisal, I was thinking, as someone who is prone to self-deprecation and self-blaming, sometimes
Yeah.
I might do that a little too much. And I assume you've come across couples where one person is definitely doing a lot more self-blaming and someone is not doing enough of it.
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
something?
Yeah, that really is something. And I think you have to just be very aware of that, pay attention to it, and manage that, because then this would not be a helpful practice, right?
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
practice is really about also learning about oneself, as well as having an opportunity to have a fresh start, to have new opportunities and new possibilities. And so it's a very growth oriented practice. What you were describing could really be a problem for someone if they went in that direction. That would not be, that would be harmful. So I think
Right.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Mm. How often do you practice it? Is there a certain time of day to do it? How do you go about it practical on a practical
So
level?
So on a practical level, then I will just speak about my own journaling exercise, and I incorporate Nikon into my journaling exercise, my daily journaling, but it may not be a daily thing because I've been journaling for a while now. But I do have a daily journaling exercise or a practice, I should say. And that is based on the work of Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist Way. And she recommends morning pages, which is truly just to sit down when you wake up with your spiral notepad and really do a true stream of consciousness. So it's a great practice. It helps get clarity of your own thinking. And I will also will then at times use the Nikon prompts for what I'm writing in my morning pages. But it's also a springboard to work with my partner with things that came up in the morning pages to develop further. So you're taking a lot of what's in our outside of our conscious awareness and putting it on paper and getting clarity and then taking it into your conversation. So a daily practice is optimal if you can do it.
Yeah, and then the morning pages, I guess, starting that off fresh and in the morning, that's a common journaling practice anyway. So if you're already
Yeah.
doing that, it's not too hard to kind of add it on, tack it on to the end of it or at the beginning or in the middle, wherever it
And
fits.
I've come, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've come to depend on it, that, it really does, so many things come out of it that perhaps would have been lost.
For sure, for sure. How do you feel this practice would impact your romantic relationship?
Well, it has, because there have been things that have emerged that as I've said, like I've been really able to go another step with my husband based on the thinking and the ideas that emerged. There've been new ideas that came out of morning pages that would not have come out. So creative ideas on a different way for us to solve a problem. Um, a new approach to parenting has come out of that. A way to work with one of our kids. That so. And then just in terms of, you're talking about a romantic relationship, I'm speaking about my marriage. Any way you can gain clarity on who you are and what you want, your partner will benefit. Your partner
Mm,
will benefit from that,
for sure,
and
for sure.
vice versa, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Are you comfortable giving an example of how it's worked for you?
Oh
Something that
goodness,
has
let me think off
translated
the
into.
top of, well, um, I will. I mentioned our daughter was traveling abroad, and it's very easy in today's world to it's hard enough when communication is complicated enough when we're in real time. But with time differences and electronic communication, there was a little breakdown and a bit of an injury for my daughter. And in the sense that she didn't feel that we had handled something as parents well with her. And she was right. And by engaging in my journaling practice, we were quite upset, my husband and I had done my morning pages. And then when it all was there in paper, then we're having coffee and we're able to talk about it. We came up with a plan together for how we were going to reach out to her. And so many of the components of that plan really were in the morning pages. My husband had some ideas to throw in, of course, but I don't believe we would have been. And by the way, that we did go another step with her, and we were able to make great progress, and ultimately everything got resolved. But it did start with that practice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm so glad that it ended up working out. I'm
It really
assuming
did.
she's like in, under 21-ish. It's a weird time
Yes.
for a lot of kids at that age. Um, Based on your experience, do you have any other kind of recommendations of a practice or a habit that you would combine with the Nikon pages?
So I will say that I believe in meditation. And there's also, I'd like to bring this into partnership, which is couples do not and don't take enough time to really kind of sit together face to face, eye to eye, and allow each other just to, co-regulate, which is the two nervous systems getting in sync. We're wired for that. It's a very efficient way for two people to relax, and the cadence that develops back and forth is can be really a beautiful thing. It's like making music, and it really reduces the wear and tear on your own nervous system to have to regulate yourself. It's a very effective way to regulate, to do it with another person. However, you need to actually have something set up in your life. And so many couples don't have this. They don't take the time. And I think as a society, we don't talk enough about the importance of this, is having a place in your house where you can come together, that you both like to be comfortable, where you can be in close proximity, where you can actually be close enough to see if your partner's eyes are relaxed, if their pupil is dilated or constricted, that you could actually see that. And you could even maybe track your partner's breathing, and just have what I call a low demand or no demand conversation. This is not the time for a to-do list, or, let's figure out what we're going to do this afternoon, the chores we have to do. It's not that. It's just kind of a chance to be. And there is a meditative aspect to it if you begin to use your partner a bit as your external object of meditation. So you're really tracking them, you're looking at them, and you're relaxing simultaneously. So if both people do this at the same time, it's quite a lovely way to connect, and it generally doesn't happen enough in relationship. So I believe that's a practice that um, everybody could benefit from.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like often we don't have the time to sit down and do that with anyone, let alone, even a romantic partner that we're living with. Like,
You're
people
right.
feel like they're too busy, or they're too packed and got too many things to do to kind of take the time to just do that. But that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing. That kind of brings us to the end of that segment. We do have a couple of questions from our audience. Are you happy to answer them?
I'll do my best.
Fantastic. First question sent in is relationship readiness, is it the same as marriage readiness? Can they be compared?
Hmm. I think they're different.
Okay.
Yeah, relationship readiness. I think there's more, that back to the willingness and being prepared. If you're willing, you're prepared enough. Give it a try. Unless there are those situations we talked about earlier, there's a few situations where just proceed with caution. But for everyone else, you have to jump in the pool and you have to experience it, and you're going to learn from it. So, but marriage readiness, that's different. And
Mhm.
I would say, and I didn't get an opportunity to mention it today, and I want to actually thank my husband for this, because when I was talking a little bit about this morning about these questions with him, he brought up something that was so obvious to me, the marriage counselor. He said, "Well, of course you're going to talk about the importance of premarital couples work," and I was like, I hadn't considered that, but it is. He was like, "Allison, really, I had such a blind spot. It is so important." I love it when I have couples come to me before they have married, and we're able to do all of this, take a deep dive into all the things that they might have been thinking about, but afraid to talk about. We go there and they have support. So, marriage readiness, I think I recommend premarital counseling for that one.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think that's a really, interesting way of putting it. Is a lot of people have been married for a few years by the time they think they need to go to couples therapy. I think because it's a legal arrangement that can be quite complicated to get out of, and sometimes they have families and dependents that are in the mix that make things a lot more complicated. But you can still have dependents before you get married, but there's not as much of the additional weight of systemic and legal weight that kind of makes the separation all that more difficult if a separation needs to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second question is, how do you know if you're just going through a rough patch in your relationship or if it does actually need to end?
Ooh. Um, hmm.
I'm
A
assuming that's not
rough
an easy answer.
patch. That's a rough patch, or have we reached the end of the road?
Mm,
I would certainly want to see a couple like this, because a rough patch, upon closer inspection, may actually reveal some challenges that this couple have had prior to the rough patch. There may be more to the story. There's no question that there are chapters in life, in relationship, that can be more difficult, more challenging than others. However, if you have a secure relationship, you still can manage. We call it, you're able to be weight bearing. The relationship can really carry a lot of weight. We saw this through the pandemic. Couples who were secure, yes, it was hard, but it didn't break them up. But if you were already, for the couples who could not get through it, and I don't want to generalize, but in some instances, it wasn't the pandemic, it was other things that had not yet really been looked at. So, rough patch has to be further explored. And many couples can learn skills and different ways of operating together to turn that rough patch around and get to more stable ground and learn from the rough patch. So there's a lot of hopefulness when someone comes to therapy with a rough patch, if
yeah,
they're really
yeah,
motivated and they want to get out of it. Um, if a marriage is over, if two partners come into therapy and there's a question of, can this relationship move forward, that has to be very carefully explored. There, you know, both have to check with both partners whether one or both want to end that relationship, how serious that is, and you really have to go a number of rounds to be sure that that's the case. Um, I think it is a tough question, an important
yeah.
one though.
For sure, for sure. I feel like that encompasses so many different aspects of like relationship problems in general, beyond just relationship readiness. Final question is one we've already discussed a little bit, but I do like the way this is worded. How do you know if you're ready for another relationship or if you're just trying to fill a void?
Mm. How do you know if you're ready for another relationship or just trying to fill a void? So I'm presuming the way that question is asked, it's kind of suggests that there was a previous relationship
Hmm.
that has ended.
Yes, it does
And
seem like
that's
that.
how it does seem that way. And there can be a real void after that relationship has ended. Um, Maybe it's the void is really evidence. It can be evidence that this may be someone who really likes to be in a relationship. And the void is a sign that they look forward to sharing their life with someone again, because even my guess is there might have been some problems with the relationship that ended, maybe, but there were parts of it that likely felt good. So I would be inclined to say that before too long, this individual might consider trying again and seeing what happens, because the void may be that they really like to be in relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I was just thinking, I guess my follow up question to this is it made me think of what you said earlier about how being unprepared for a relationship or a lack of relationship readiness isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it's not the be all or end all of a relationship, at least from the prospect of, a lack of preparedness. Could it just be that this kind of want or desire to be in a relationship is equally neutral in its own way. Like perhaps it might not be good for that person. Maybe they do need to be by themselves, but the void is just kind of a sign that they want to be in another one. It's not here
Yeah.
or there.
It's not here or there. There'd be so much to suss out from that and more to learn. Um,
Mhm.
but you know, the word void itself. If there's an emptiness inside, there's a notion again that you have to fill that yourself. Someone else can't fill that for you, right? I mean, I certainly have heard things like that, and that people will say that that's a wrong way to think about it. And I understand that. But I continue to think we're missing the point that we are meant to pair bond. We have been wired for relationship from, the beginning of time as human beings. And that being alone, while certainly a choice, and it's an important one for so many people if you want that, that there's so much good evidence to show that being in relationship is a great way to develop yourself individually. I want to say one thing about that couples who really do relationship well, that they come up with a way of setting up their life so that they support each other, they enjoy each other, and they're each other's champions. What we expect to see is that individually they will go as far as they are meant to go. So a solid relationship is a beautiful springboard, and I've seen it. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in my practice. It's a beautiful springboard for true self-development. The key is a secure relationship.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's a very, very optimistic answer to this question, and I do appreciate it, and I'm sure the person who sent it in will appreciate it as well. But that's all, I guess, for our audience questions. Thank you very much for answering them. Um, we do have our open mic now, in which I allow you to speak about anything you want for a few minutes. Uh, did you have something? Did you have something in mind that you wanted to talk about?
I guess I'll just speak a bit about there's such a leap of faith. How do we do it? How do we actually say, I'm going to put myself out there, jump into a relationship, go those steps to form a secure relationship when we all have to live with this denial, with that tomorrow anything could happen and that relationship could end? That existential reality here that nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. And in some ways, I think it requires so much courage to be willing to take that chance, in all relationships, to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable, and knowing that, it's a fragile and precious thing in many ways when we think about it. We can't think about that too much or we wouldn't do it. But it is there somewhere, always in our peripheral, the idea that this could happen. So it's courageous, but when you do it, the ways you can learn about yourself, the ways that two partners can find out that it's through problem solving, it's through having the most challenging problems in front of them and being able to come up with some type of solution that works for both of them. That does a lot for both partners' self-esteem. And another thing about the errors that we make in relationship, if you do it well, partners can really go on to learn and create better outcomes. So it's through all of the bad moments with my in-laws or your in-laws, or when we were at dinner with friends and things didn't go well, the couples who can take that material and talk about it and consider how they want to do better next time, how they want to work together next time, so that when the day is over, they feel like they're friends and they don't turn against each other. That's what it's about. It's about making each bad moment a learning opportunity and committing to becoming better people. So I just think I applaud all the people who every day are getting in relationships. And I also want to note those who get out of relationships. That can be such an act of love as well, because not
Mm.
all partners are meant to be together. And it takes tremendous courage once again to end a relationship, and it can be deeply painful. But some relationships are better off ending. The couple will go on to have something they never even imagined. And I hear that too in my practice when I get to meet couples who are in second marriages or third marriages, and they will say, thank goodness that we found a better match. That has to be said out loud. So there's so much courage in this relationship game, and there is just so much to gain.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess when you were talking about existential crisis, I think that's really applicable, especially to maybe some younger members of our audience, for millennials or Gen Z, who are probably dealing with a lot of different kinds of existential issues
Yes.
beyond just, relationships and what's going to happen to that. So I guess that's really important advice to keep in mind for those people, to not maybe stress about all of those things on top of, I don't know, climate change,
Oh my goodness.
potential nuclear war. Yeah,
It's a
for
lot.
sure. It is so
Yes,
much. It is so much.
it is so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all of your insights with us. Where can members of our audience find you?
I would say Allison Howe, LMHC.com is the best way. And it's just been a pleasure for me to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think you've brought a perspective that I haven't heard from a lot of my guests so far. So it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've been listening to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found at re.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Aditi. Thanks for tuning in.